bit of,
Okay,
oh,
you see it now, right? Thinking,
yeah, I see cut off selecting an appropriate recording procedure. I don't know if there's anything below that.
uh, I think I think you'll be okay. I will put the whole slide deck on our session for tonight so you can review this and have access to it. Will that work for you?
Okay.
So, I wouldn't worry about this too much, okay? These are sort of talking points at this point, okay? Is that good for you, Cindy?
Yeah.
Okay, so this PowerPoint will be shared as soon as the meeting ends. I'm sorry, I should have had that up before. It will be like literally up in 5 minutes. So you'll have the whole PowerPoint. You can look back at it, okay? Um, thank you guys. Okay, are we ready? There's everybody can see. Please let me know. Can you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the data points?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. So, ABA, which is called Applied Behavior Analysis, is one of many models for explaining a pattern of behavior develops as maintained and changed. If you're in the field of special ed, um, often ABA has a dominant force. It has a dominant presence. Um, but what we like about this course is that we don't we value, we embrace ABA, but we recognize that it's not the only model for explaining pattern of behavior develops. But it is an important pattern. Um, and some of you are working in schools. Thank you for those that have shared your information so far where ABA is important. And others, you might be looking at different models for behavior. But ABA is an important part of behavior. It's based on 1950s laboratory science methods and most importantly, precise scientific mathematical terminology and using data and then recommends interventions. Whew. So some of you might be thinking, oh my God, Pavlov's dog, this is a terrible thing. But if you're working in any charter school, any public school setting, the use of data, soft or hard data, is very important. So in this class, we um, we are able to look at data in a scientific manner, both hard, which would be quantitative, or soft, which would be qualitative data, and use that in our work. So that's part of what we're doing. So let's talk about data. I love data. Uh, let's not be scared of data. Let's embrace data. And for you as a teacher, everything that comes in for your evaluation, even in independent school, a charter school, or New York City public school, um, data is an important conversation. So how do I support what I'm doing and understanding, giving context for that? So in this class, we often look at challenging behaviors. That was our do now um, for us. So I want to take a couple seconds. And if people want to put into the chat some things going back to our do now, just for a second. Um, this was our do now. Um, so just even this is soft data, just bringing into mind um, one of those two questions, and you can put that into the chat for a second. Go back to that. Okay. Dr. Mack, you're still with me, right?
Yes, I am, and I'll be
Sorry.
monitoring the chat.
Thank you so much. Um, anything shared or
Yeah, something just came up. Well, like actually, a number of things are coming up here, which is making them bounce around. We'd like to minimize the behavior of a student that elopes, uh, referring to leaving an area, elopes from his seat often to obtain reinforcers. And we'll discuss those terms. A fourth grader with ADHD who shuts down or refuses to do corrections on mistakes made in the work. A child who often struggles to keep their hands to themselves and follow directions, especially during transitions. This is a behavior I'd like to see improve. When a student of mine would actively avoid tasks every day. Another one, I have a student with extreme anxiety and she shakes and screams every time she has to do a writing assignment. So I'd love to come up with a system to help her relieve this anxiety and show it in a different way. There are so many. Would you like me to continue on, Dr. T?
oh no, this is great stuff. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
so.
Minimize dumping toys constantly, I guess, pushing there to turning them over. A first grader who gets very physical with people, objects, and objects when aggravated or frustrated. A little mind reading there, looking into what's the reason behind it. I have a student who has outbursts when he's not called upon. Another one, yes, I work with students with autism who have limited expressive and receptive language skills and may exhibit challenging behaviors, such as 1 hour tantrums. I'd like to focus on a child with major ADHD who cannot stay in his seat. Hmm, perhaps he can, but not yet. Uh, Calls out and is extremely disruptive. A very sweet child who struggles with this.
All right.
Another, a student who screams if not called upon. A kindergarten student who cries if she isn't able to finish a work on time, even if if we're doing it later. Oh, there are more. Shall I continue on, Dr. T?
Well, I think you're good.
All right. So many good ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So we often call those when we work with the individual and different challenging behaviors, tier two or tier three behaviors. Sometimes they fall into tier one. We'll talk, that gets a little bit into the modules for RTI. But uh, it this class is a beautiful class because it speaks to the bigger picture, classroom management, um, and also the ability to solve problems. And we'll get into that rule. We got into that rule last time where there is often two or three students that are really struggling in a class, and they can turn the whole class, become really problematic in terms of the direction of the class. So, so thank you for sharing those. Um, because whether you are working as a specialist or you're working as an ICT teacher or you're teaching a whole class, we all come across the students that might um, be become challenging in that aspect. And so how do we deal with that? So in this class, we do look at data. And we want to look at two types of data. And this is very, very valuable information if you are in the New York City public schools. Um, so when I say qualitative data, often called soft data in New York City public school systems, it doesn't mean it has a lower value. It just means, in fact, the New York City public schools are valuing qualitative data or soft data much more to show evidence of growth, both in the Danielson framework and other things. So here's an example. Qualitative data is descriptive information. It comes from sources like interviews, entries, and student logs or observation journals. Um, and so what you just posted, a lot of that is qualitative data. It's your own observations or experiences or surveys or about students. Um, and here's an example of those, which again, for part one of the paper, um, we off we do both qualitative and quantitative data in part one and part two. So that's an example right there. Um, Qualitative is more than a miracle. And we can collect numerical information on different attributes or aspects, which in this course we call dimensions, dimensions of an action, such as frequency, duration, magnitude, latency, and topography. These are very important for part one because part of your assignment is to do a qualitative part, explain some context of the student you're observing, give us context for that. Um, and then when you get to the point of how you're going to collect data, it's going to be on a qualitative form. And to make it qualitative in your data collection, you have to choose one of these forms or dimensions to measure the data. So do you want to measure frequency, duration, magnitude, latency, and topography? And the choice that you make is dependent on your goal or your measure of behavior. So what are you trying to look at? Um, and so they're very connected, um, which we'll get into. Our goals are, our targets are measurable and observable. And then how we collect data is going to be based on how we take our qualitative data and make it measurable and observable. So that's part of what we're looking at today.
We have a question that popped
Yeah.
up in the chat, Dr. T. What's the difference between duration and latency or latency?
Mm. So awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, Duration speaks to, and please, I'm going to refer to the master, Dr. Mack.
Yeah, I'd be glad to jump in on this one and give you a break, Dr. T.
Yeah, that'd be
That
awesome.
duration is when the behavior of concern does pop up, when it is witnessed, we mark it the time that elapses between the start and the finish of that behavior. Now, latency also has to do with the passage of time, but it's the passage of time, the time span between a stimulus saying go for the behavior and the behavior actually happening. And so many of you are concerned about latency, that we give a student a direction. That's the stimulus. Okay, you could begin the quiz now. And
Mm.
the student doesn't start on that quiz for who knows, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And so there we're concerned about the time span between the do it and the kid doing it.
I think that's great. Um, my interpretation for that is the difference between duration and frequency, and what you'll find out is that there are some forms for measuring that measure both frequency and duration at the same time. Latency speaks to the gap, as Dr. Max said, the gap between some type of direction or expectation and then when the behavior starts. Duration is a measurement of the behavior, whereas frequency is how much the behavior happens. Duration is how long the behavior happens, and magnitude is the intensity of that behavior. And topography is speaks to the form of the behavior it takes. Most of you will focus in on frequency, duration, and magnitude. Um, that's what it comes, but we'll get a little bit more into that in a second. So hold on a second. Okay. So why is it important for teachers to be competent in collecting data? I shared my reasonings. I made my argument. You might have been drinking coffee and not listening to that, but we would love to hear your responses in the chat box. Why should it be important for you guys to collect data? Anything come up, Dr. Mack?
Yes, I'm kind of handling a number of them here. And let's see. Um, I noticed that earlier, to get to know the kids.
Oh,
To,
awesome. I love it. Love that. I
yep,
love that.
to progress monitoring
Hmm.
to see whether the behavior is continuing to be maintained, is reducing, or expanding. Oh, there's so many coming in. Helps the teacher meet the individual needs of students to figure out how to best support them, to see how we can help the student and what we can improve. Data informs our instruction, whether it's whole group, small group, or individual. Progress monitoring again identifies specific triggers, the time of day, the class period, gives us clues as how to best stop the behavior, help a student with their grows and glows.
I think those are good. I think those are good. Let's look at some points that you and I let's see where they connect for us. So yeah, progress monitoring, access progress. Ooh, this is important for us as special ed teachers, how they can contribute to the FBA. And although this class is not about the FBA, particularly, that means functional based assessment. That's a legal term. Um, when a student with an IEP is acting out and their behavior is causing problems, or they get into a disciplinary issue, tier 3 or tier 2, particularly tier 3, um, the state requires them to have a functional based assessment to determine if the behavior is a result of their disability. And I use that word in context. It could be also as a respect of their divergent needs or disability. But and then they have to create a behavior intervention plan for the students. So there's very strict rules about just suspending a kid because they're acting out if the acting out is part of their um, IEP needs, divergent needs. All right. Um, And so data is important for the FBA and BIP process. We can't just come in and say, hey, let's make sure all our ducks are in order. This kid's a jerk. Trust me, I've been in meetings where that's happened back in the day. You can't do that. Our job as special education teachers is to say, no, we have to be use low inference terms. We have to be objective and with our approach to every child to make sure every child succeeds. And we have to use data in a certain process to do an assessment and make sure that they have opportunities for a BIP. So a good example is a teacher might say, well, the student just doesn't want to study like their peers, but there might be other contributing factors to why they don't go home and study or do their homework, including their disability, um, and different things in terms of access. So we have to be You have to look at it in terms of data. That would be very important. And then we monitor progress on the BIP to determine our strategies are effective. I mean, Dr. Mack has more experience than me, but I would just share for those that are in my class, a good example of this in raw format, not in a formal format, but when I did for first 10 years that I worked in juvenile facilities, and I went into a facility, uh, this is D79, and they had 179 physical incidents the year before. That's a strong data point. So we approached that data um, and we said, how do we reduce those incidents? So we were able to look at the types of behaviors that are happening and create monitoring systems that would predict a physical altercation. And then based on that prediction, we were able to do interventions before the kids acted out, which reduced the physical altercations to 23 the following year. Um, that sounds really impersonal, um, but I would just say that you can use data to to make your argument of improving things that make it a safe environment for everybody. So obviously, being in a school where there's 185 fights or 175 fights or whatever the year before, versus there's only one or two incidents, physical incidents before, suggests that there's more of a safe environment. So let's get down to what you really want to know, which is seen in the class. The first two parts of our three-part paper involve the collection and reporting of both types of data. There's qualitative and quantitative. Um, so by the time we meet again, we want you to submit a definition and proceed. We want you to submit a draft of something, collect something, work on something on part one. Um, so we can get peer feedback when we meet again. You can submit to me if you're in my class, um, and I can give you feedback online and you can revise. But do but work on but remember, take the two quizzes first and then collect your data. And then the most important part is you must, for me, for my class, no, it says optional. We want you to succeed at part one before you start part two. Because if you go to part two without completing part one, you're going to create more work for yourself. And there's going to be, my feedback to you is going to be like things that go back to part one instead of part two. So please take the time to do part one, understand it. If you are in a situation where you cannot observe a child in a class, or you don't have, it sounds like we have a lot of people that have access to students that have challenging behaviors. But if you feel like you're not, look at the alternative options. Stay on after class today and talk to Dr. Mack about those alternative solutions. But part one is very, very important. There's four parts to part one. There's a qualitative part, and then there's making it to the descriptive part of the behavior that you're looking at, and then picking your dimensions, and then the procedure to measure those. So you don't have to collect data, you just have to create a plan for collecting data for part one. All right. So part one, as I said, well, actually, my fault. There's actually five parts. Background, the focused learner, again, qualitative, and then target behavior, which is typical. Oh, sorry. Um, back here. Sorry if this is cutting off. The slide will be in the other session, but part one is background, the focused learner. This is all online. then the target behavior is no more than 3 sentences. It should not be more than 3 sentences. Um, and the dimensions is just what we said. What are your choices of dimensions that aligns to the behavior, and then your data collection procedures. So you can do subheadings. Typically, most of this is a page or 2 page, no more than that, um, and so forth. All right. So then we're going to get a little bit into, I think all of you know how to do the qualitative stuff, but defining target behaviors and identifying the dimensions of behavior to assess. Look at that. Data, data, data. Let's get excited about data. I really do like data. I love data. I think it's so exciting. Everybody gets so down in schools about data, but data is like amazing stuff. And this course allows you to look at both sets of data. That's what makes me so excited about this course. You can look at the qualitative and the quantitative and make it manageable for both of you. So let's look on the data of Lee's defined behavior. You want to identify and define the recurrent behavior, determine the dimension of behavior, and to decide on the type of behavior recording, and decide when and where to observe, and then observe. So that's more part two is observing and collecting the data. But again, we're talking about part one is collecting a plan, right? Examples of precision definition. Asking permission. Student verbally requests the privilege engaging in an action. Student walks away from verbal or physical aggression aimed at him or her. Um, Student accepts referee's calls without comments, abides by the rules and their intent. So we want to be precise and objective and measurable, but all of these are very objective. These are things that we see. So if the best way I would put it, this is something I learned from Dr. Mack. You would, what you see, if you were to give a description of what you see, if your partner or friend was, if I saw this and I was to give it to Dr. Mack, they would be able to see the same thing. There would be no confusion. So instead of saying, Dr. Mack, I'm looking at asking permission. So specifically, precisely, I'm looking at what does the student verbally request the privilege of engaging in an action. So if Dr. Mack came into my class, we're on the same page. We are in sync. He is able to observe that student based on what I said because I gave a precise definition. Whereas if I just said, hey, Dr. Mack, can you come in and observe Tony asking permission? Dr. Mack might have his own versions of asking permission. He might have his own context for that versus mine. So we have to be very precise in what we're talking about. So in order to collect accurate data, we need to know the criteria for when we can decide that's it, there it is, and record. We define the action in such a way that it is precise. I just said that. Sorry to be redundant. But here's the two kickers, right? Observable and immeasurable. I would argue kindly that these are also components that would be part of, if you're asked to be part of IEP writing team, that you also have to write in a way that's precise, observable, and measurable. So both the parents and the students that also participate, and teachers that participate in IEP, understand the goals and the actions that you're looking at, and they can support that in their classrooms. So observable means able to be heard, seen, felt, or otherwise witnessed. Measurable means that we, on a scale of 1 to 10, we can measure that. There's some way to measure it. So if a student, um, if you say, oh, okay, a student refuses to do work, a student is avoiding work, we have to look a little bit more deeper on what would be the observable behavior and what would be the measurable behavior from both of those concepts? Okay, here we go. I love it. What should we avoid? That's the best way. Yeah. How will I know if I've seen a cow? It will look exactly like a cow. Curses says curses words. Sleeping is asleep, out of seat. Focus learner is out of seat. Oh my gosh, this sounds redundant, and you're probably some of you might be rolling your eyes, but you'd be shocked. Um, if you're communicating with your co-teachers, with your community, you can't just say it's a cow. You have to say what it looks like to be a cow. You
I
say,
got an example of that, Dr. T,
yeah, give me an example. Perfect.
that if you ask me to go into a classroom and mark down any observance of a student cursing, well, I had a frustration response that when things bother me, I would say the word that rhymes with the wall that holds back water. That the wall is a dam, and I would say the word that rhymes with that, sounds like that. And I don't consider that to be cursing. My
Mm,
wife did.
good.
And, if the wife ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. I have since learned other terms for when I am frustrated that she considers to be acceptable.
No, that's a good point. Because I work with older kids, not so much younger kids, but well, even younger kids. Like my son will say, "Dad, that's not a curse word." I'm like, "What? That's not a curse word." Everybody says it. If he says hell, for example.
We
Uh,
could use a 1 to 10 scale to monitor the magnitude,
yeah.
that the one that I used to use might be a level 1, where perhaps the F word would be a level 10. We could actually measure the magnitude of the curse words.
No, that's a good point. Because there is subjectivity of whether it's a curse word, and there are cultural aspects. I mean, I would say cursing would be in this class. I don't know if you'd want to use cursing. Inappropriate language and defining what inappropriate language to the context would be more culturally relevant. All right, let's keep on going. I'm a little bit behind. Um, So again, we are looking at writing definitions of behavior. Avoid using terms that are vague or unable to be measured. So I think Dr. Mack and I were trying to talk through how some things that might be obvious, we just looked at, like cursing, might be vague or unable to be measured because they can be interpreted differently. So avoid non-specific words like know, comprehend, think, appreciate, understand, enjoy. Um, I also in the arts, and often we have to work with teachers to say, um, you know, complete, how do you measure something like involvement or um, you know, how do you measure creativity? Like that becomes a very subjective word. What is creativity? Um, so or even like if you were to think of something simple like, okay, what makes a good applause? Um, versus not a good applause. So you have to be very specific in the language that you're using so that people understand what would make a good applause or what you want to do. Active, response, quiet, disruptive, defiant. So they can serve as names of behavior, right? We want students to be active. We want students to respond. We want students to be quiet. We want students to stop being disruptive. We want students to be stop being defiant. But there needs to be something that follows up that's a precise description and observable actions of what that means.
My former students would have different ways of being aggressive and different ways of being defiant. And so, yes, important to delineate exactly what we mean by that term.
Yep. But we don't want to. I don't want for my class for. Let me go back for a second. I mean, these are fine words for you to start with in the qualitative part to say that my overall goal is for the student maybe to be quiet. You need to talk through in language that we talk through as teachers. But then to make a plan, we're going to shift once you say that. I'm concerned about one of these five things, but now how do I create a plan? How do I target that? And so this is where we're getting to. Unwanted physical contact. Okay. So there's the bigger picture, right? The student continues to annoy people in my class, touch people, they're inappropriate, maybe they're referred to the dean, whatever else. Okay, great. We want to eliminate that. We want to decrease that. So let's define what that means. Touching, grabbing, or brushing against another person's bodies, arms, legs, shoulders, hair without consent. That's very precise, very specific. It is measurable and observable. Elopement leaves the instructional area before gaining permission to do so, passes through the door frame into the hallway without permission to do so. Again, precise, observable, and measurable. Doesn't mean you can't use this word elopement or unwanted physical contact. Just means to be followed by the other. And those are the feedback that we will give you in part one. If we do not see the precise, the measurable, or the observable, we're going to ask you to go to that. What else do we need to avoid? Mind reading. Oh, these are the things that you probably in your first draft are going to do because that's what we do as teachers. We love our kids and we know the reasons that they're doing that. They get out of their seat because they have HDD. They insult answers to others, maybe to exert power or because they're trying to avoid doing the work of other people because they can't do the work. There's always a reason. That's what teachers do. We're really good at these things. And you can write that in your first draft, but then you got to go back and take it out. We have to, um, we can't, this cannot be part of our reports. Um, that's not what we're here to do. We're here as teachers to make things as objectable and measurable as we can, and continue to collect data. So a psychologist might say, they're getting out of their seat because of their ADHD, and that's fine. That's part of whatever their reasoning is based on data in a different way. But we as teachers, we have to look at it as we're getting out of their seat. That's the problem. And we have to listen to different reasons from the families, from other teachers, um, to understand the context. That's the qualitative part, but we also have to measure and see what works. So the writing is more required for description and action. Um, so again, we want to be precise, measurable, and observable. We're going to look at a few examples of what those means. Um, yeah, as I said before, define the behavior. I kind of jumped ahead of the slide. Define the behavior and then stop. We all know our kids and we know the different reasons that they're doing these things. Just like, but teachers can't always be parents. They can emphasize with parents. This is what parents do. I'm a parent. I know what my kid's behavior is, and I know the reasons why they're doing it. That's the job of a parent. And they have to give that information to the teacher and the different psychologists, and we have to look at things. But as a teacher, we just need to define the behavior and stop. Nicholas's target behavior for reduction is being unsafe. To make this a priority, because as long as physically unsafe behaviors are in play, I think they should always be addressed. Once the student has a safe body, we can begin to worry about like calling out. For the purpose of this task, here we go. Look at what's in yellow. All this other stuff is so important. It's so important to you as a teacher to be able to write it. But for us in this report, the yellow is important. Unsafe is as in any time Nicholas is grabbing, pushing, hitting, kicking, scratching, or throwing objects at peer teachers. All the other stuff is important when you're talking to parents, when you're talking to your co-teachers. Your opinion is very, very important. But for the writing a report and being very precise, measurable, and observable, we want to look at what's in the yellow. So we're not devaluating all the other parts, Dr. Mackin, are not devaluing that or where that would play in your career. But for the sake of what we're doing here in the collection of data, we want to narrow in onto the yellow. Okay. So here's some examples. Put the extra information in the induction. Yes, part one and part two of the part one, you can talk to your ears, whatever, for me, for my class. I mean, I don't really think part one needs to be more than 2, 3 pages, but if you need to talk and express all the different contexts for your student because you know you love your student, you really feel passionate, that's where you put the qualitative data. It's into the last 3 parts that you have to be very precise. So remember the target behavior, that's part 3 of the section 3, subheading 3 of the part 1 report. It should really only be 1, 2, 3 sentences, only the criteria. You can put the other stuff in the context above, right? Do not use do and do not. Does, doesn't do it. Replace do or does with more descriptive action. The student does the assignment because the learner completes the assignment or engages in actively writing upon the assignment paper. Replace the absence of something not with a word. What is the student doing? Student does not follow directions. Becomes fail to comply with the oral direction within 10 seconds. Okay? So not following directions is very good. It's in the right direction. But we want to be more specific. So failing to comply with an oral direction within seconds. Engages in action other than the one directed by the teacher or displays opposition to the command. Why, Dr. Mack, could we not just say does not follow the direction?
That was a question to me, Dr. T. I was in
I would
the
say they
chat
are.
there answering a few things.
Now, it can be rhetorical. So why can we not say do not follow the direction? I mean, for those of you in the classroom, uh, I would hope that you would know that. Every teacher's direction is different. It is can in directions can be directives and direction can be kind of confusing. Do you mean the direction that's on the board for the tasks that are on the PowerPoint? Do you mean the implied direction? Do you mean what's on the paper to complete the work? Kids will tell you, why are you getting on my case? I'm doing the work. I'm following the direction. Teacher's like, you're not following the direction. So being specific, I'm unable to comply with the oral direction or maybe the written direction. Um, but direction is often, there's many directives in a class, many different tasks that are given. So we have to be very specific. Sorry. Do not think of a red rhinoceros. Yeah, we want to avoid the word not. So teacher says don't hit, kid hits. I've been doing this for over 20 years and I still make this mistake. Stop
The,
talking. Not,
there's been some medical research on that, that when they've done brain scans of the part of the brain that's in charge of receptive language, they find that whenever there's a void word ushered, no, don't, never, that part of the brain doesn't activate. The synapses don't fire. But when the action verb that follows it comes, then the person understands what's being said. So when you say don't hit, we're actually suggesting it, things that otherwise wouldn't come to mind.
Yeah. And as you'll see in some of the modules, part of this also is how you set up your classroom, what the expectations are. Uh, is that part of why kids are kind of in different places and so forth. So, anyways, let's for our class, let's try to avoid not our that we want to avoid that. Let's focus in on more measurable and observable things, right? Avoid negatives. So example, off task. It's not working after being told to not to be off task. Off task. I mean, that's I like the second one. Engage in actions other than the one directed by the teacher.
Right. Flip that behavioral pancake, that there's two sides of the coin. And instead of thinking about, well, what isn't the kid doing? And we can't define what isn't happening. What is the student doing? What is the action we witness?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So I hope you see that, right? So in part one, um, it, it's not really focusing on the actions, it's focusing on what they're not doing, which we just said. Let's avoid the words not. Let's put the emphasis on the actions that we can measure or observe. You cannot, I mean, you can, technically measure duration, in the sense of they're not doing the actions that you're saying, but in order to measure that duration, you would have to have the second off-task behavior, which would be so they're engaged in actions other than the one directed by the teacher. So we could measure that, either frequency or duration, a lot easier than it is not working, because that's a little hard, right? So Jake is not fully engaged physically, verbally during small group instruction, whole class instruction, independent work time, and unmotivated to completing tasks given to him, so he's avoiding his work by sleeping on his desk, talking with friends, or reading his joke book. So notice, again, we have things in yellow. Um, so all this stuff is important, but we're really measuring sleeping on his desk, talking with friends, and reading his joke book. During small group instruction, Jake is sleeping on his desk, talking to his friends, and reading his joke book. And we can sometimes differentiate for those two. So I hope that we see how I would just say it's not like one is wrong and one is right. I would just use the word one is more optimal for being successful in creating a intervention plan. If you just say is not fully engaged physically or verbally, it's going to be really hard to collect data on that and then create a plan. But if you were to be precise to collect data on is avoiding work by sleeping on the desk, talking with friends, or reading his joke book, those are things that can be easily measurable. And then the intervention plan on the flip side can say, well, last week, Jake slept on his desk in math class 80% of the time. This week, he did not sleep on his desk. That's a big improvement, and you can use that. So that's what we're trying to do here. So, yeah. So which of the components of the definitions need to be modified in order to better ensure that two observers would obtain the data? Which wording needs to be eliminated? No need to rephrase, simply spot the problem. So we'll give you a few seconds to, well, oh my gosh. Give you a couple of seconds to put in the chat which ones do you think or which wordings need to be eliminated or rephrased.
Yeah, some folks are spotting the negatives, the void words like not. And we're also seeing some mind reading in some of these definitions with because. Mhm. Yep. More of spotting that what isn't happening. And again, some mind reading being spotted. Yep, because of impulsivity and exerting power. Yeah, and so they've pretty much spotted the void words and the thoughts about causation before we've got the data to contribute to our thoughts.
All right, guys are on track. All right, let's go. So so in terms of identifying and defining target behaviors, this is again part 3. Identify the most needed social or academic behavior. So in this class, um, it's probably going to be focused on either social or academic. And we want to define the behavior so precisely that everyone can measure or look at what actions are being demonstrated. Instead of student will be polite, um, we can look at these examples. Louisa will say thank you when someone does something nice for them or gives them compliments or item. Celine will say, excuse me. When seeking assistance, Theodos will say, includes the word please. So for my class, that's the 430 section, target behaviors can be the behavior that you want to increase, the desired behavior, or target behaviors can be the behavior that you want to decrease or eliminate. Either one follows the same directions. Mhm. Yep. This is so this kind of speaks to whether we're focusing in on the desired behavior, which gets a little bit into part 2 more because you have to focus in on the behavior that you want to increase versus the behavior you want to decrease. But some of you right now, what you might be measuring is the behavior that you want to, for part 1, that you like off-task behavior, however you define that, might be the behavior that you want to decrease and that you're measuring. But when you get to part 2, you're going to flip that um, by saying the opposite action. So off task would then become on task. And then you have to define that. Ask yourself, what does the behavior look like or sound like? And here's some examples: calling out, hands below, top of head, comment voiced by student. Um, what I like about this and what you can do for our next session is if you're struggling with this, bring in your notes about what the behavior looks like or sounds like. So if you're looking at a student and they hit or they act out or they're off task, you maybe take some notes about what that looks like or sounds like, and you can bring that in next time and we can get some peer feedback around that. Behavior tip 2, imagine a single isolated occurrence of the action. What is noticed when the behavior happens once? And so doing so helps to avoid bringing in non-descriptive things like reminiscing about past. Yeah. Uh, frequency, reasons for the behaviors. I think this is important because if you're working with a student, it's going to be hard to separate, oh my God, Sean has been so problematic for the last 3 months in math class. They don't want to work, they don't want to do everything. You have to let all of that go and just focus in on one singular isolated occurrence of the action and see if you can measure it. Um, and that becomes very important. It's also an issue of equity and cultural responsiveness because it's not fair to punish a kid because of our past experiences with the kids. We really need to go in deep and try to understand what is going on, what is happening. Problem, the kid is constantly out of his seats. So which definitions are precise, succinct, observable, measurable for in seat or out of seat? So put some of those into, anybody want to put some things into the chat real quick? You see anything in the chat, Dr. Mack?
Some things are popping up now. Student is not in seat, needs to clarify where they are. And yes, I know that I've had differences in opinion of what we mean by out of seat or not in seat, that the student might be sitting on the writing platform of a desk, and someone will say, well, he's out of seat. And others will say, well, no, there's the seat, and the student is in contact with it. And so, yes, we need to be precise what we mean by out of seat or not in seat.
Yeah,
Now,
I would also say that for example, if you're working with divergent learners, like my son, um, often likes to stand up at his seat when he's writing. That's part of his physical thing,
mhm.
but it's not disruptive. So you might be like, is it really being out of the seat, or is it being out of area or being disruptive to other people in the learning environment?
I
So
think we
you,
could all agree on I'm hoping we could, that we could all agree on the bottom four. Can we, can out of seat be defined as totally out of contact with the chair? Yeah, that's one way we could define it. And with the bottom three, these are actually from my memories of a student I work with. Teachers were saying, this kid is constantly out of his seat. And I'd remind them that nobody can do anything constantly except breathe. And so, but we definitely want this kid in his chair more so, whatever in the chair means, more so than he was at that, at the baseline at the beginning. And so we would reward him for having any part of body in contact with any part of chair. We were just glad to see him not roaming around the room. That was what we meant by in seat that particular week. But the following week, once he was successful with that, okay, in order to get your reinforcement, your reward, your prize, your butt needs to be in contact with the horizontal plane of the chair part, the seat. And once the student was accomplished at that, then we raise the ante. We demand more of him for that reinforcer, and in buttocks in contact with the horizontal plane of the chair and at least 1 foot touching the ground. So what was in seat? Well, the definition of what we meant by in seat changed from week to week.
yeah, I agree. So the four below are more appropriate if your problem is the kid is constantly out of his seat. My point was that um, often we in regular classes, you might find that what you think is the problem is actually not the problem. There might be another problem. So if you're having a problem moving to this area, like this becomes like, well, that doesn't, I agree with what Dr. Mag is saying, but that's not really solving the problem that I see. Then you have to go back to what the problem is. So, but if the problem is that he's out of his seat, this is how we would measure it. Right. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, all right. So we will, I was going to do this as a small group activity, but Um, I am a little bit behind, so I want to be valuable of your time. So we'll just do this as a whole thing right now. Um, put it in the chat. Which one of these are observable and measurable, and which one are not?
We're getting a lot of number threes, but I'm not sure whether they're being graded as observable and measurable or not. Okay.
I think they're saying, yeah. So I think
Three
that,
is measurable, seven is observable. These are what I'm reading off of
yeah,
the input here.
great.
120 words is measurable,
Yep.
but reading orally or silently. I just would want to know that as a data recorder and how I'd measure it. So we're getting 3 and 7 is measurable, 9 observable. 5 could use a bit more detail, we're seeing here. Uh, could 4 be observable and measurable? Let's talk about number 4. Well, as I see it, yes, we are just measuring that she states that she's hearing them because we can't get inside her mind. But we can make a mark that, yes, indeed, she just said that she was hearing voices.
Hmm. No, that's a good point. I'll go through each of these, and Dr. Mack. So just be honest. Uh, you know, I think Dr. Mack and I both are mindful that we might give different feedbacks um, for what is measurable, observable for us, and making things precise or moving you in the right direction. But we don't want to say that either of us is the end all of end alls. So for me, for number one, gets out of the desk and hits other students for revenge. My feedback, if you set that as your target goal, is it sounds like you have two target behaviors. One is getting out of the desk, and the other one is hitting other students. The for revenge, the third part, is part of the um, part that we said before that we want to keep out of target behaviors. It's not measurable or observable, but getting out of the desk and hitting other students can be measurable and observable, but we would have to choose one or the other and provide criteria of what you mean. So I would probably ask you to choose one or the other, take away revenge, and add a sentence explaining your criteria for that. That's how I would provide feedback if I feel like you needed to be more measurable, observable by giving precise information, right? So we won't go through all of those, but I just wanted to give that example. And it's okay. And again, I want to hit our calendar integrity. The importance of staying on time and submitting things for our next session and giving feedback. It allows you to have the opportunity to get feedback from peers and feedback from us that can make these work versus just feeling like you have to do it on your own and getting frustrated, right? So I'm not going to do a small group activity because we're a little bit behind. So we're gonna get to the finish line. Whew, oh my gosh, everybody take a breath of air. You guys are doing great. So let's get to the next part, dimensions. So after we pick the target behavior, what exactly do we want to assess and change about the behavior? Again, um, we said there's flip options, right? So in part one, part two, you might be focusing on the behavior that you want to increase or the desired behavior, or you might be focused in on the behavior that you want to decrease. In either case, there's a change. So what are you assessing and changing? Are you trying to increase um, that target behavior or trying to decrease the the target behavior and replace it with something else. So these are some great things to think about. What is it about the action that makes it seem different from acceptable versions? And nearly all the actions shown in the classroom are displayed by the other kids. What aspects can be seen as appropriate versus inappropriate? These are, these are really, I feel like as a teacher, this makes you become a little bit vulnerable because now you're talking about what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. And also, one word that we haven't used yet, but that is used in behavioral work, is in addition to being measurable and observable, the behavior should be teachable. So when we think about appropriate, what is teachable behavior that we can help with that student? And so that's what helps us when we think about dimensions. Um, so what do we mean? Well, let me go back here a second for one second. So when we say dimensions, how many of you can remember the 5 dimensions that we talked about at the beginning, back in slide 12? Anybody want to put them in the chat? I'm putting a test out there.
We've got latency, duration, frequency,
Ooh,
magnitude. We're at what the four locus, where it happens, the body or the environment, and topography, the form that it takes. So I think we've hit all six.
that's right. These are the dimensions. And so that's very important, right? Those are very subjective in the sense of your target behaviors. Do you want to measure frequency, the duration, the intensity? What's really important, right? The biggest example I could say is a student is constantly saying the F word. Okay, uh, so that could be in 3 places. I mean, all those could fit into that word. Are they screaming the F word to a point that the intensity is so disruptive that it messes up the whole class? Or, and let's just take away our value statement, like, okay, well, it's inappropriate for any child to say the F word in any class. It should never be said. Let's throw out our own opinions. Let's just look at it objectively. So are they, do we want to measure how many times they say the F word in the class? And are we able to decrease that? So maybe they only say the F word one time. Trust me, I know that's very controversial. I was accused of giving kids candy in the jail, everything else, because the jail mentality is it's either nothing or anything. And I'm like, well, as long as we're decreasing it, we're moving in the right direction, we're going in the right place. Not everybody agrees with that. Other people could look at the duration. How long do they go on these tangents where they just start using the F word and maybe the F word is part of another thing that they're just completely off task? Or is it intensity? I am screaming the F word to such a point that it disrupts the whole class. I can't teach, I can't hear, or anything like that. So we need to, there's a little bit of qualitative part to choosing your dimension, right? Now, after you choose your dimension, we we have to look at how we assess that behavior. And so in the modules, they'll go over examples of recording procedures that would help you collect and analyze the data. And these are all different examples of that, which are included in your modules. Whew. Well, Dr. Beck, I just jumped ahead of the slide. You guys,
Well, you're. Yeah, I'm betting you've presented this information before, and you're been familiar with it. Yes.
oh my gosh, I'm like the worst co-teacher ever because I jumped ahead. Let's stay with the script. All right. From the definitions to dimensions, in which ways do you wish to change the behavior? There are 6 aspects or characteristics of behavior that can be assessed. Our behavior change interventions attempt to measure a dimension for the better in the eyes of the modifier. So I would just say for the strategies for success is that yes, we could get into looking at many, many dimensions on the student. And that creates more, this is the theater model. This is my theater background. Done is good. So in this class, don't don't try to do everything. Focus in on one of those aspects, one behavior change, one dimension. And you, even if it doesn't change the behavior, it's data inquiry, and you're gonna learn from that data inquiry, even if the intervention didn't work, and maybe you'll come back and say, oh, I need to relook at a different dimension. Don't try to do everything at once. Okay. So there's some different helps with that. Again, these are the points. Yep.
Yeah, for the upcoming slides.
Yeah. So a school uses a decimator stoplight in the cafeteria to reduce the volume of sound voices. Which is that dimension?
We see in the chat a number of people putting their bets on magnitude.
Mhm. Okay.
And yes, indeed, I used to work in a school that had this sort of stoplight thing going on. And if the light turned from green when the decibels got up to, and I'm guessing here, maybe 75 decibels, the light would turn to yellow, and louder than that, it would turn to red, and they would be losing points toward a an extra dessert for free for the whole cafeteria, that sort of thing. Well, actually, we want to focus on the positive. While the green light's on, they're earning points toward that special privilege.
Let's try another one. Reducing the number of misspellings in a 100-word excerpt from a composition. Oh, we have a, let me go back here. We have a misspell here, yeah. I messed up here. Hold on. Uh-oh, I think we don't have a misspell. I think we changed to a language. What happened there, Dr. May?
Well, I'm
What
sorry.
language is that? Oh,
that's that's my spelling.
that's a,
Free form.
I think that's another language. All right. So you guys can put in there. Not reducing the number of spellings in a 100-word expert form of composition.
Yep, it seems to be a consensus here that we're talking about frequency.
Yep.
We want to reduce whatever that number is to a lower number of events.
Track team sprinters are trying to reduce the time between the starting tone and exit from the starting blocks. Ooh, trick question. Track team sprinters are
We're
trying.
certainly seeing latency here.
Ooh,
The
right.
time that transpires between the stimulus and the action, the response.
All right, you guys are nailing it. All right. So for part three of the paper, we're going to get into part three a little bit later on. I don't want to get too much onto that. Uh, oh, this is another example. Sorry. For part three of your paper, you're recording the form of praise used by the observed teacher and how often each type was used. Which one of these is that? This is actually, oh, in part three, sorry. That we're doing.
The form and how often.
Form and how often.
And we're seeing people, uh, a whole lot of threes, number threes.
Mhm. Great. All right. Um, so here when recording, which recording procedure do we use? How often it recurs, how long it recurs. These are most people, oh, sorry. Most people, I love this because it has multiple steps. So first, you look at how often or how long it lasts. And then when we go down, right, break it into one of those two categories. And then you can go down and look at all the different types of recording, partial intervals, latency, duration, or full interval recording. And we're not going to go over those in this class because, drum roll, Dr. Mack, we have it all in the modules, which we are asking you to take the quiz beforehand and read the modules because they'll go over the different recordings and go over the target behaviors. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with either of those right now, take a deep breath. The recording will be up, the PowerPoint will be up, but more importantly, the modules will be up, which explain this and allow you to interact with these things probably better than Dr. Mack and I are doing in our presentation right now. So you have different ways to make sense of this. Okay. My gosh, we're almost at the end. On our class website, which is Brightspace, there's assignment descriptions. Again, go back to learning modules, learning modules. If you take anything away, do the learning module first before you start working on part one. We outline which ones you need to do and take the quiz. Don't worry about what you score on the quiz. Just do the modules and take the quiz. There's also exemplar papers, there's rubrics. And most importantly, we've structured it so that in our lab sessions, you have an opportunity to get feedback from us and your peers. So the next session that we meet, we will go over a little bit of part two, but more importantly, you'll have an opportunity to get feedback on part one before submitting with us. Okay. This is for my class.
Oh,
Uh,
let me interrupt you quickly here. I would also like for my class to um, begin submitting the exit tickets. So when you see it here on this slide, please submit it to my email if you are in my section of the class.
yeah, in my section, I have it on Brightspace. I will have the PowerPoint and the exit ticket up immediately after class. I didn't put it up before, but it'll be up there. That is important, because we have to do first attendance next week. So I don't really want to be over the weekend if you haven't responded to this or the intros, sending you emails trying to track you down, what's happening. Don't just assume because you're on this space that we have you marked as attending. You need to submit one of those things for both classes, the intro, the exit tickets, so that you have documentation that you actively participated. If you were not able to attend today and you're watching this video, that is fine. You can also do your exit ticket and for my class, get your full points. All right.
I need to interject one more time that I
Sure.
will send out an email to my class section with the exit ticket to which you will respond. And also in the chat, someone is asking, well, where do I get this letter of introduction to observe in a school that's, in my neighborhood? And you can ask your professor for that letter. If your Dr. Turner is your letter, he will your instructor, he will forward your request to me, and I will then make sure it gets to you.
I My suggestion is I think I did this. Somebody sent put something in the exit ticket last time for the same thing. I would suggest, yes, you can email, if you're in my class, you email me, and then I will include Dr. Mack on that. And then they will give you the letter that way. Just email me, and then I will include Dr. Mack, and we will get you the letter of introduction. We did that for one student. So if that's what you need, first step is just email me. And if you're in Dr. Mack's class, I would suggest just email Dr. Mack. So awesome. That's where we're at. Whew, that was a long one. This is probably the longest class that we would have. But we did make it an hour and a half. We will stay on and answer anybody's questions or concerns. Thank you so much for attending. Maybe you could stop the recording now, Dr. Mack.